Hi, I'm Mayor Latoya Cantrell of the City of New Orleans, and I would like to extend my sincerest gratitude to our Orleans State Delegation for their attention to legislative matters and for representing the residents of the City of New Orleans at the state level. Now, this special session should be an opportunity to collaborate on best practices and to address crime across the state of Louisiana. Well, instead, we have concerns that much of the proposed legislation does not effectively address crime at its root causes. And that's what we're about in Orleans Parish. It is imperative to recognize that these proposals can put our residents, our visitors, and even our law enforcement personnel at further risk. The fact remains that the City of New Orleans has been and continues to be trending in the right direction relative to crime, locally and even nationally. My administration, make no mistake about it, will continue to work with the New Orleans Police Department, Louisiana State Police, our state officials, our community partners and stakeholders to ensure that we enact the best solutions to keep our people safe.
Earlier today, a federal grand jury returned an 18-count superseding indictment charging New Orleans Mayor Latoya Cantrell and former New Orleans Police Department officer Jeffrey Paul Vappy II. They are charged with a series of fraud, obstruction of justice, and false statement offenses for their role in a nearly 3-year fraud scheme that we allege exploited their public authority and positions. Mayor Cantrell and Jeffrey Vappy, a member of her executive protection team, developed a personal, intimate relationship. They embarked on a scheme to defraud the City of New Orleans and the New Orleans Police Department.
Latoya Cantrell, who is currently the mayor of New Orleans, former bodyguard, New York Orleans Police Department officer Jeffrey Vappy have for fraud and obstruction of justice. This case is another banger coming from the United States of America, and it's currently ongoing. As it stands now, at the time of making this video, Mayor Latoya Cantrell had actually pleaded not guilty, but we are going to get into this case, and you see a lot hinges on this case, and this case is actually also hinged on a lot, if I should put it that way. You see allegations of this mayor and her bodyguard being caught up in corruption, allegations of them being caught up in mixing intimacy with work, and a whole lot of things that have culminated to this indictment for fraud and obstruction of justice being leveled against them. Now, let's get into the detail. But before then, make sure you subscribed. So, Latoya Cantrell, who is 53 years old, and Jeffrey Paul Vappy II, who is 52 years old, are both residents of New Orleans. And like I was saying, they've been charged in a superseding indictment on federal charges concerning wire fraud and obstruction of justice. Now, Mayor Latoya Cantrell and Vappy were both charged in a conspiracy to commit wire fraud in violation of Title 18 of United States Code, Section 371, as well as a conspiracy to obstruct justice in violation of Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1512K. Forgive me if I get a bit technical, but this is a case that has a lot of legal technicalities. And this time around, unlike how some of my episodes have been, I think it's very imperative we go deeper into the legal annals of this case, because it actually has to do with a mayor and the funds of the city being allegedly misused. Now, Vappy is also charged with 12 counts of wire fraud in violation of Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1343, and Mayor Cantrell is charged in 6 of those wire fraud counts. Vappy is also charged with making a false statement to the FBI in violation of Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1001. Mayor Cantrell is also charged in 1 count of obstruction of justice in violation of Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1512, and 2 counts of making a false declaration before a grand jury in violation of Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1623. I'm taking it like this step by step so you appreciate the details of the indictment and the categories of the indictment, if I should put it that way. Then I'm now going to get into the allegations and give you details of what actually happened. So, according to the allegations contained in this superseding indictment, while Mayor Latoya Cantrell was mayor of New Orleans and Vappy was a New Orleans Police Department officer and a member of her executive protection team, Mayor Cantrell and Vappy developed a personal, intimate relationship as from October of 2021. Now, from that time until Vappy's final retirement in June of 2024, they are alleged to have actually embarked on a scheme to defraud the city of New Orleans and the New Orleans Police Department by exploiting Vappy's job and Cantrell's authority as mayor to have the city and the New Orleans Police Department pay Vappy's salary and expenses during times that this police officer Vappy claimed to be on duty, when in fact he was actually engaged in personal activities, mostly with Mayor Latoya Cantrell. So you see what is happening here. Per this allegation, it's as though the mayor was exploiting her authority, whilst the police officer Vappy was also exploiting what he has to work with and taking money from the police department for work he actually isn't doing, whilst he's spending time on personal intimacy with the mayor, who is also abusing her power at her hand to facilitate their personal time together. This is nasty if it's true. And I say if it's true because as it stands now, it's still an allegation and investigations are ongoing. Like I told you, Mayor Latoya Cantrell has actually filed a not guilty position on this issue. Now, the allegations contained in the superseding indictment describe the many steps that Mayor Latoya Cantrell and Vappy took to hide their scheme and perpetrate their continued fraud, including using a secure messaging platform, WhatsApp, to exchange over 15,000 messages, pictures, and audio clips in an 8-month period, where they would intimidate subordinates, harass a citizen, lie to colleagues and associates, delete evidence, and also make false statements to the FBI agents, and go on to give the grand jury an affidavit signed under oath and penalty of perjury that contained numerous false statements, and ultimately committing perjury before a federal grand jury. All of this for the purpose of distracting and impeding inquiries and investigations, including a federal grand jury investigation. Now, for a mayor, she should know better. Obviously, she should know better, and I believe she actually knows better. But I'll have to re-echo again that these are allegations in the indictment. She's yet to be found guilty. So, in the eyes of the law, she's actually presumed innocent until proven guilty. But I'm just breaking down what the indictment is saying. That's not to say she's actually guilty. I've put this out there, but I'm just re-echoing, so it affects everything I say going forward, just so you don't get me out of context. So if these are true, then it means that this mayor should have actually known better, and I believe she knows better, same as the police officer. Because I'm sure As a police officer, these are crimes he may have seen other people commit and maybe even arrested people for committing. And as a mayor, you saw her at the beginning of this episode talking about how she's supporting the legal fraternity and everything in between. She knows better. But I think that sometimes knowing is one thing and the decision to do or not to do what your knowledge requires of you is another thing. And that, to me, per this allegation, is what I see playing out here. So, this superseding indictment also alleges that Mayor Latoya Cantrell and Vappy arranged for Vappy to accompany Cantrell on at least 14 domestic and international trips to maximize their time together and engage in personal activities. Now, it's also come out that in their private text messages, you would see Mayor Latoya Cantrell characterizing trips with Vappy as times when we are truly alone, in quote. And in quote again, what spoils me the most. Now, these trips included trips to San Francisco, which Vappy and Cantrell decided to extend an extra day so they could visit a series of Napa Valley wineries. Yeah, they went and enjoyed and tasted some wine. And it seems like it was at the expense of the city of New Orleans because obviously the mayor's activities will be funded by the city. While Vappy was wine tasting on April 9th of 2022, he had actually claimed that he was at work and he was paid for working a 15-hour day shift. So he was tasting wine with his alleged mayor girlfriend or whatever, but he had filed with the New Orleans Police Department that he was actually at post working as a bodyguard for this woman. Fast forward to August of 2022, Mayor Latoya Cantrell said she would make it happen to have Vappy accompany her on a 3-day trip to Washington, D.C. Now, this is a trip that they both agreed that they needed, according to evidence. And shortly after they returned, Vappy described the trip to Cantrell in another message as another leg on their journey, as he declared his love for her and their physical relationship. Now, in total, it's estimated that the city of New Orleans paid over $70,000 for Vappy's travel on these trips. And when she was asked for her reason for bringing members of the Executive Protection Unit with her on out-of-state trips, and this was actually a practice that Mayor Latoya Cantrell began about 5 months after Vappy had joined her protection team. And when she was asked why she started doing this, she justified it as a pivot due to COVID and a matter of her safety. But then, in a contradicting observation, although she said she did this as a pivot due to COVID and as a matter of her safety, it was also seen that at the same time, however, she continued to take out-of-state trips without protection. So then where was the standard? Because in fact, on the same day she gave one such statement to defend herself for doing this, she cancelled a work trip to Miami and traveled alone by plane, and then by bus, and then by ferry to the island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. And guess what she went to do there? Yeah, she went to spend time with Vappy while he attended a conference paid for by the city of New Orleans related to his position on the HANO Board of Commissioners, a position which Mayor Latoya Cantrell had appointed him a few months earlier. On other occasions, when Vappy was unavailable to accompany Mayor Latoya Cantrell on a trip, Cantrell decided not to take any other member of her executive protection team. So then the question is, what's so special about Vappy? He's the only one she would go with. It seems quite suspicious, particularly given that It's been alleged that messages have been seen between them where he's professing love and they are professing love between themselves. It looks like a conflict of interest and a breach of ethics have set in from both sides. It doesn't end there. This superseding indictment also alleges that both Vappy and Mayor Latoya Cantrell were aware their conduct broke criminal laws. For instance, in April of 2022, an associate told Latoya Cantrell explicitly in multiple text messages that spending public funds and using public resources for her personal relationship was a felony. Now, when Cantrell and Vappy learned that the news media was investigating their time together, they agreed to be straight and together. Days after the first news stories broke, in November of 2022, Vappy conducted numerous online searches for New Orleans area attorneys who specialize in the practice of criminal law, and he further researched WhatsApp's security features. So, this creates an impression that he was trying to gear up and protect himself, almost as though he knew he had done something wrong he needed to hide or prepare to defend against. Now, these defendants' wire fraud scheme, nevertheless, still continued until Vappy's retirement in June of 2024. So they were unrelenting. They continued it despite even knowing they were under scrutiny. And that should tell you how far deep they were. And to think that a 53 and 52-year-old are doing this per the allegation, if it's true, if they are doing this at this age and at that level, it's such a shame. But again, she's innocent until proven guilty. Now, as alleged in the superseding indictment, in July of 2023, the grand jury issued subpoenas to both Vappy and Cantrell, compelling the production of records. The FBI would come in and interview Vappy. And during this interview, Vappy lied about the nature and circumstance of his relationship. In response to this subpoena, Mayor Latoya Cantrell produced a selection of responsive records, but none of the over 15,000 WhatsApp messages she exchanged with Vappy were part of it. Now, this mayor also created an affidavit sworn under oath that she had activated a feature that automatically deleted messages in 2021. You see, I don't know if this is true. Then I would say that I don't know why she would lie about this. Maybe because she's 53 years old, she might not be that technologically savvy to understand that with what she's lying about, the FBI have more than enough resources to go to the back end and confirm if it was true or not. So that lie just bought her a little time, but a little time to get disgraced because she'll be found out to be lying. Now, Mayor Latoya Cantrell then submitted a screenshot of her iPhone showing that WhatsApp messages were set to delete in 24 hours. In fact, Cantrell did not turn on that feature until December 26, 2022, which was roughly 1 month after the news media began speculating on her conduct. So definitely you can read in between the lines on this. Now, Vappy conducted online searches concerning WhatsApp and its security level, and by which time several people had warned Vappy and Cantrell that their conduct was illegal. This disappearing messages feature, moreover, only applied to new messages. During roughly this same period, Cantrell also manually deleted thousands of her prior WhatsApp messages with Vappy. And as alleged, even at the time Cantrell responded to the grand jury's subpoena, she still possessed more than 50 pictures, including screenshots of correspondence with Vappy that were responsive to the subpoena, but which she nevertheless concealed from the grand jury. And I'm not done, and honestly, I'm not done. But so far, so good. But what I'm seeing here, it looks like she's in for a very bumpy ride. Because it still doesn't end there. The indictment further alleges that Vappy and Cantrell continued their pattern of obstruction through the rest of 2023 and 2024. And to think that this mayor and this police officer actually thought they could beat the FBI. It's funny. Now, this obstruction included improperly pressuring the interim superintendent of the New Orleans Police Department to overrule findings of an internal investigation into Vappy's conduct. When the interim superintendent did not heed that directive, Mayor Latoya Cantrell ordered the interim superintendent to nevertheless reassign Vappy back to her protection detail. Months later, in a meeting Vappy attended, Mayor Latoya Cantrell informed the interim superintendent that the interim superintendent would be replaced. That is abuse of power right there. To go to the extent of trying to dictate what that interim superintendent should be doing, I don't think that is in consonance with what the law authorizes this mayor to do. And to go to the point where it's like this superintendent did not budge and give in, so now that is another thing altogether. And it seems more like an abuse of power. I don't know what you think about that, but it doesn't sit well. Now, similarly, when a private citizen took pictures of Cantrell and Vappy together in public, dining and consuming alcohol, while Vappy reported to be on duty at that same time, Cantrell obtained non-public information about this citizen, filed a police report, and sought a restraining order against the citizen. Yeah. It's so strange that all these could be happening just because of an intimate relationship whilst on the job. Now, what is going to happen to Mayor Latoya Cantrell and Vappy if they are found guilty? I'm going to tell you. If they are convicted of the conspiracy to commit wire fraud, Mayor Latoya Cantrell and Vappy each face up to 5 years in prison and up to 3 years of supervised release. For each count of wire fraud, Cantrell and Vappy each face up to 20 years in prison and up to 3 years of supervised release. Now, for the conspiracy to obstruct justice, if found guilty, Mayor Latoya Cantrell and Vappy each face up to 20 years in prison and up to 3 years of supervised release. For the false statement to the FBI, Vappy faces up to 5 years in prison and up to 3 years of supervised release. For each obstruction of justice, Mayor Latoya Cantrell faces up to 20 years in prison and up to 3 years of supervised release. For each count of making false statements to a grand jury, Mayor Latoya Cantrell faces up to 5 years in prison and up to 3 years of supervised release. For each count, both defendants face a fine of up to $250,000 and a $100 mandatory special assessment fee. Now, these are interesting times. Cumulatively, it looks like if found guilty on all of these charges, it's very possible that Mayor Latoya Cantrell and her alleged suspected boyfriend, Vappy, the former New Orleans police officer, could spend up to maybe about 50 years in prison. They are already 53 and 52. That would mean that they may actually spend the rest of their years in prison. Talk about falling from grace to grass. All because of what? Intimate relations on the job. Come on. Honestly, if this is true, I'll be very disappointed in them. First, as adults, 53-year-old and 52. Come on, you should be grandparents by now, advising the next generation to do better. not to get caught up in such shameful things at the very level you've gotten to. That is, if the allegations are found to be true. I'm following the case as and when there are updates. Trust you me, I'm definitely going to bring you these updates. I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe.